Hello, everybody, and welcome to My Favorite Friendship. I'm Marc Muszynski,
And I'm Brian Wohl.
and we are best friends. And this is a true friendship podcast about real friendships from history. But here's the thing: um, we only podcast with our friends, and we also only podcast for our friends. So just by listening to this, you've got two new friends, which is part of the reason we made this in the first place to celebrate friendship, to help people make new friends, and to learn from the friendships that have come before us, especially in these kind of crazy times.
Oh, Mark, if people want to be your friend, how can they find you on the internet?
Well, they can find me at Marc Muszynski on all the different social networks. It's just spelled really easily like it sounds. MarcMuszynski. And how about you, Brian?
I can be found at Brian Wohl on all social media platforms. If you can read, you figured it out. It's fine. There's not that many letters in Brian Wohl.
Yeah, we'll have links on things wherever you're
Sure.
listening to this.
Yeah. Follow us. Let's talk
Um,
about friendship.
yeah, I mean, there's some great friendships out there. I actually have one for you today.
Before we get to that, I wanted to ask you, how are you doing with your friendships in this uh, era of or time of self isolation? How are you keeping your friendships up?
So I've been doing a lot of Zooms. I'm not very good at posting on things. So for me, it's a lot of like email, phone call, text, like direct communications. And then recently, yeah, we've been doing a lot of Zoom game nights. The Jackbox TV has been getting a lot of play. But the funny thing to me is that it's made all friends equally close, like just geographically. And so there's a bunch of people that I wouldn't normally see, but I got invited to like a game night of my friends from Chicago the other week, and I've been doing semi regular convos with some of our other college friends that live in Illinois and Colorado respectively. And then just earlier tonight, I did Passover with my family, which are who are in Illinois. So that's not even normally an option.
How
How about
cool.
you?
I've been using Zoom. I've been using FaceTime.
Mm.
I did use Facebook's video chat option as well. I have been chatting with people who walk their dogs when I walk my dog.
How close do you get to them when you do that?
Oh, dog length, so about 6 feet. At the length of a leash.
Sure.
We're far enough away where we're not really close enough, but it is the only time I ever see people that I don't really know. And in this time, I'm so excited whenever I see someone I don't know because it's just not something that happens anymore.
Hmm.
And there were times where I would go out before all this where I'd be like, I don't really want to meet anyone new. I'm exhausted from seeing people today. But now I just am so excited whenever I see any human being. I'm just like, oh, look at you existing. I'm trying to.
That's
But
awesome.
yeah, that's most of it. And yeah, and I keep in touch with my family too. But yeah, it's uh, it, this time I'd say with COVID-19, I've become friends with my brother a lot more than I've ever been friends with my brother. We have never talked as much as we have talked during this time.
Since everyone's equally close slash far, they're all one screen away. Why not hang out with your brother?
Such a change in everything because my brother and I have really never. We were 4 years apart in school always, so we were never in the same school. Uh, we I My brother and I just were never close. But during COVID-19, we've at least been able to talk to each other uh, 3, 4 times a week, whereas my brother and I used to go maybe 6 to 8 months without talking to one another.
Wow.
So that is a big change. So you have a friendship today.
I do. I do. It's the friendship between Groucho Marx and T.S. Eliot, which fascinated me because I love both of those people.
Groucho Marx and T.S. Eliot. That's the guy that made Cats?
Sure, yeah. I mean, unfortunately, that's what he's known for right now.
Oh,
But
I'm sorry. T.S. Eliot is the poet who wrote
yes,
the poems that Cats was based upon.
but prior to that, I mean, he's super well known for a bunch of really incredible works. The Wasteland is probably the most famous, but also The Hollow Men is another favorite of mine. And he was sort of this dour, stuffy, super waspy intellectual, but like the darling of the literary world. And for him to be friends with Groucho Marx, who's essentially the exact opposite, like his parents were immigrants, he was a self-made man, he never went to college, he was a clown, essentially a comedian in movies, god forbid movies, the lowest form of art. But the two of them apparently became close later in life. So this story starts in 1961 when T.S. Eliot wrote Groucho Marx a letter and asked for a signed photograph.
Wow. So he asked for an autograph.
Yeah, basically he was like, "Can I get a signed headshot?"
I wonder how did Groucho, did Groucho have to field letters from other fans? How does T.S. Eliot get a direct line to Groucho Marx?
So I assume I was thinking about that same thing because I
Yeah.
feel like the studio, especially at that time, big studios were kind of like handling everything. But also, this was a little bit later in both of their careers. I think they were both. Uh, I think Groucho was 71 and T.S. Eliot was 73 at this time.
Oh, so they were close in age.
Yeah. And so they probably were aware of each other for decades prior, because Groucho Marx, even though his very public persona was this satirical comedy character, he was a very smart, very literary person. In fact, the article, one of the articles that I read about this was from the New Yorker, and he actually published some of his first humor essays in the first issues of the New Yorker.
Wow.
And so
So
the two
Groucho
men
was probably
probably
one of the early names to sell the New Yorker to people. People would be like, "Hey, there's essays by Groucho Marx in this."
you read the latest Groucho Marx joint.
Yeah.
So the two men probably were aware of each other, and perhaps T.S. Eliot, as like a very connected intellectual type high class person, knew somebody who could put him in touch, or maybe he went through the studio. I don't know, but needless to say, Groucho Marx wrote back with a headshot, and he expressed his admiration of T.S. Eliot's work, and the two struck up a correspondence for the next 3 years until they eventually met in London for dinner. Basically, it was a long letter back and forth that resulted in a double date. And throughout that, they would talk about things going on in their lives. They would talk about each other's work, a lot of compliments about stuff like that. And then ultimately, they met for dinner and they shared a love for fine cigars and cats.
Wait. Slow, slow down. Slow down.
Yeah,
We gotta move back here for a second.
sure. I mean, you have questions about that? Go on.
Yeah. So cigars, got it. Uh, that's fine. But oh my god. So cats. I didn't know Groucho was a cat guy.
I didn't either, but he said that they both enjoyed cats.
I'm looking it up on the internet right now, and I have found one photo of Groucho, and it seems like it's in his kitchen with cats.
Like multiple cats?
Yeah, he's got like a little kitten. Let's see here. Um, just like kind of. Oh, it's only one cat. I'm sorry. It's one black cat, and it's looking up at Groucho as he's going into his fridge. So I so it looks like Groucho did have at least one cat. Uh, how cool! So they're cat owners. Have you ever felt a bond with other pet owners Do you feel like pets help uh, start friendships?
I definitely think they do. And as a non-pet owner, I often watch pet owners bond over things like that, and I'm a little jealous. But I'm not jealous enough to get a pet. So
Well, you had a pet growing up.
yeah, I had a dog. We didn't get along super well though, because he ate this Lego set that I spent like a month putting together, and after that, it just wasn't the same. We sort of bonded later in life, but for a very long time, we were just like, you know, two ships docked at the same port. We
Wow.
weren't we weren't interacting very much.
Yeah, I said earlier, one of the few human interactions I have are with other dog owners who are walking their dogs.
Yeah.
Um, and that's now I haven't become like close buddies with any other dog owners, but it is one of the biggest icebreakers I've ever encountered in my life. And as someone who has not owned a dog until their 30s, what a change.
And you love it now, right?
I do, but I had no idea what I was missing out on because people will immediately, just looking at my dog, they immediately know certain things about me or make assumptions about me very quickly, and it gets that scariness out of the way, and they feel very free to talk to me. I
Hmm.
had no idea how that would, you know, I guess someone without an animal could show that through their clothes, their hair, their tattoos. But a dog is also an accessory for someone to get to know you.
Yeah. It's a thing to ask about. You can ask, what's the dog's name? Or you could just say, oh my God, that dog is so cute.
And also, people can see that you have a healthy relationship with your pet. So they would
Hmm.
assume maybe you have other healthy relationships in your life.
I do think about that when I meet people. Like it used to be people who were mean. If you notice someone being mean to their pet or being mean to like servers in restaurants or coffee shops, places like that, that was a big thing that I would notice. And then lately, I've been noticing the way people treat Siri and Alexa.
Oh yeah? Who talks to Siri and Alexa around you? Does that I don't have that happen that much.
I mean, it's not super often, but it really sticks out to me when someone's like Alexa, put on my favorite song, you idiot. Like, or like when Alexa or Siri, it's always when they get something wrong and the person thinks that it's funny to be like, oh, shut up, you dumb robot. And for some reason, just the need to put down this inanimate object, like for humor, really stands out to me.
Wow, I never thought of that, but it will now.
And on top of that, I'm like, you're just bringing the robot apocalypse this much closer.
As they just taunt that poor robot.
But conversely, I go way out of my way to, like, I'll thank, like, reflexively be like, thank you when I ask, for something, and Alexa turns down the music or whatever.
Yeah, I'm always very nice to Siri and Alexa, but I also do not hesitate to ask them for things at at a whim. If
Oh
there's
yeah,
a conversation in the room and we're like, I'm not sure about this, I will ask immediately. Uh,
I feel like they like, if as much as robots can like anything, I feel like they like being useful. I wouldn't hesitate to ask. It's sort of the treating them like garbage. And I'm like, why do you think that's so funny? Why do you need to treat this robot like trash?
yeah, that would weird me out.
And it's probably a class thing, or like wanting to feel better than someone, which actually kind of brings us back to the story of T.S. Eliot and Groucho Marx, because T.S. Eliot died shortly after their dinner, and a lot of their letters were published, in subsequent biographies of the two men. And what I think is so interesting is, at first everyone was like, "This is amazing. This sort of high class, artist and this low class artist, like, coming together and bonding over mutual respect." It was this sort of story of hope. And then as time went on, a different read on the situation kind of emerged. And it turned out their friendship was a little fraught, because Groucho Marx initially sent back his favorite, studio headshot of himself and signed it. And T.S. Eliot got it and was like, "Wait a minute, this doesn't have the mustache." And what T.S. Eliot really wanted was a picture of Groucho Marx essentially being his goofy, low character. And so he wrote back to Groucho Marx asking for a portrait of him in character, essentially. And Groucho Marx did not send that for 2 years while he continued to correspond with him. But in
Wow.
the meantime, he kept kind of needling T.S. Eliot about stuff. Um, Especially, like, for example, T.S. Eliot was a pretty famous anti-Semite. In the 30s, he had published a lot of things, really explaining how cultures had to be homogenous and we should all be aware of the agenda of the international Jew and stuff like that. And Groucho Marx was an extremely outspoken, almost compulsively outspoken, child of Jewish immigrants, and never hesitated to. I don't know if I'd say he was like being proudly Jewish, but he was very conspicuously Jewish. And so he would ask Eliot thing. He would go out of his way to mention that he and his wife were traveling to Israel. And T.S. Eliot, who in the wake of World War II, because this was the early '60s, I think had kind of realized that his point of view earlier in life about Jews and many other people uh, had not quite panned out the way he had thought, and had started to, he at least regretted feeling that way, even if he could never get over it. And so Eliot would go way out of his way to be like, "Oh, Israel! I hear it's so nice. I wish I could go there. I have great admiration for that country."
Wow.
But Eliot would mess with him too, because Groucho Marx's biggest hang up, his biggest insecurity, was that he dropped out of school in 7th grade, and he felt like he never got to fulfill his sort of intellectual potential. I mean, the guy was clearly brilliant. He had obviously, both in business, in comedy, in writing, in all these different areas, he was super well read. But on paper, his resume looked like it's sort of uneducated, low class person. And so one of the letters, my favorite letter back and forth. So when Eliot was asking for a picture of Groucho Marx with his signature mustache, he had said that he put Groucho Marx's photo up on the wall right next to the portraits of W.B. Yeats and Paul Valéry. But he wanted the picture with the mustache because people would come over and no one recognized who Groucho Marx was, T.S. Eliot claimed. And Groucho Marx, a few months later, saw an article in the Times Book Review that was an interview with Eliot conducted in his home. And in the interview, they described Eliot's office, including all of the things hanging on the wall. And in Groucho Marx's letter, he writes that one person's portrait was conspicuously absent. I trust that was just a mistake by the author. And T.S. Eliot writes back with some excuse like, "Oh, I think they were only describing the oil and water paintings and not the photography. I trust."
Wow. There's a little bit of shade going between them there.
Yeah. And so finally, after 2 years, Groucho Marx, who's always kind of sending him a little inappropriate things, little jabs at T.S. Eliot, sends him the photo that he wants. And T.S. Eliot is very appreciative. And the next time that Groucho Marx is in London, T.S. Eliot invites him over for dinner. And we have no record of the contents of that dinner, but we can only assume that it was just as on edge as all of their letters actually turned out to be. And what I think is so interesting is it was these two people who admired each other so much, but also what the other person represented was was their own what T.S. Eliot represented was Groucho Marx's greatest insecurity. And what Groucho Marx represented was like T.S. Eliot's greatest shame. And so even though there was a lot of things they shared and a lot of interests they had in common and a lot of things they could have talked about, it was very hard for them to move past who they are and who the other was to find that common ground that's so important to friendship.
Wow.
But they kept trying, so that's impressive. So it's a mixed bag in the end, however you want to read it. But I thought it was just fascinating that these two people came together.
It's incredibly fascinating. It's weird. I don't really have any groups of people that I particularly hate. I can tell you, I would certainly avoid most Republicans. I for the most part, morally, they just do not align with me at this time. If we're talking about William F. Buckley, maybe we'd be fine, 45 years ago. But in 2020, Republicans are definitely not in line with my values. I have had some people who are fans of my stand-up write to me and say that they don't appreciate my liberal views, but they'll say that they enjoy my jokes. But
Keep dancing, monkey.
yeah, but I don't really engage them. I just there's nobody that I felt like engaging for that. And at this point, people with views like that are just people that I would not engage with. But it's amazing that Groucho would still want to engage. I guess it's because he respected T.S. Eliot's mind so much. Because otherwise, I wouldn't really engage a person like that. Would you?
Well, I also think that is a thing. So I feel like one of the big dividers in our time is ideology, like the way that you're saying, in a way that it may not have been throughout parts of history. Because, I mean, certainly at the time these two guys were coming together, class was one of the biggest things. And it was like the article that I was reading describes it as it, how it would have been shocking at the time if those two men even corresponded, in the same way that like Arthur Miller marrying Marilyn Monroe was shocking.
Mm-hmm.
But obviously now that's not as big of, no one's like, oh well, so and so, this novel, like a novelist would be thrilled to have a filmmaker adapt their thing. They'd make so much money off of it.
Yeah.
So those same divisions don't exist, but we have newer, stronger ones, like like people with different ideologies, especially ones that you feel are damaging to the sort of public well-being. It becomes really hard to sit across the table from them and talk about what you're having for dinner when you're like, why do you think that people should not have access to healthcare?
Yeah. It's very difficult. But and also another thing that I'm interested in is they started their friendship with a in person friendship with a double date, and I'm not a I haven't done very many double dates. I It's just not a thing I've done a whole lot of throughout all of my relationships. I've never been a big double date person. You've done a few of them, right?
Yeah, we've been on a decent number of double dates. I love them. I think they're a great way to meet new people, especially because when you meet a new person, you want to hang out with them, you want to do something, but sometimes it's weird to just hang out totally alone with someone who's basically a stranger. So you're like, let's bring our significant others. And then not only do you get to see more and learn more about this cool person you just met, but you get to meet a totally new person that they think is cool.
Man, yeah, I just I haven't done a whole lot of them. I've gone on maybe two double dates, and they've been good. They're fine. I like them. But I'm not sure. Since I've only had two, I'm not a fair judge of this thing. Have you gotten any actually valuable friendships out of a double date? Have you had one that's like lasted and been a close friendship?
I think so. I think often a double date is spawned out of someone you met in another capacity, like a coworker who's cool. And you're like, I want to hang out with this person. We can either get coffee or go on a double date. The thing that I think is tough is where you go after the double date, because you know there are so many couples that I love hanging out with. I think are so cool, but they're busy people. They have whole other groups of friends, and if we don't have enough other people or activities in common, sometimes it's tricky to make that time and connect them into the rest of your life.
Mm. See, like for me, I guess that's why I throw a lot more parties because I feel like that's a little bit more of an effective way to meet people and hang out, and then the friend groups can mix a little bit.
I totally agree. I really wish our apartment was bigger and better for entertaining so I could have more people over. But the one thing about a double date is that you're kind of locked in for the conversation.
Mm.
And so you get through the what do you do kind of stuff quickly. And then you're sort of forced to figure out what else to talk about. And I don't mean that in a bad way. Like you have to find out something new and different about this person or you'll just be sitting in silence. And sometimes I think at a party you don't always get to that point.
So when you invite somebody that is your friend from work on a double date, with you and your wife, uh, do you do any scouting on their wives and like be like, is this person actually cool to hang out with, or what do we do with this person?
Nope, not at all. I think part
You're
of it
just going
is
blind.
totally. To me that's part of the fun because I love meeting new people. And I like because I feel like you can, even if they're mean or boring or something, you can tolerate 2 hours with a person if especially if you care about their significant other and if your significant other is enjoying themselves, then you know what? You can stick it out. And I usually find that the say it's a coworker, for example. I already know a lot about that person and I know where they work already and I'm very familiar and I definitely don't want to just talk forever about work when there are other people around. And so it kind of puts a spotlight on that person's significant other usually and you get to learn a lot about them. Unless you're a real jerk and you only talk about yourself and your work.
Well, when double dating gets to happen again, I'm sure I'll give it a try again.
I mean, I feel like it'll happen sooner than some other things if we're allowed to maybe gather in small groups soon. Double dates might become the standard, the only thing you can do.
Oh wow. Well, I'll get good at it soon.
I feel like the trick to me in my mind is just ask questions and be willing to go deep on who someone else is and what they do. You'll always get to something interesting.
I guess I feel a lot more comfortable in either a large group or a one-on-one situation. Where it's like small, like very small group, I don't feel as comfy in there.
Okay. Like one on one because you know this is the only focus, and large group
Yeah,
because you're like, well, I can just, if this is weird, I can just walk away.
exactly. But in a small group of like four, five, six, I feel like that's the most challenging when it comes to me socially. Uh, it's just, where do you focus? What do you do? How do you make sure you're not excluding somebody?
It's tricky.
I feel like you're bound to exclude somebody, and then I feel like guilty, and then it's like, oh no, I haven't been paying attention. What's wrong? And then I'm on the floor. It's over.
You're not wrong, and those are all dangers. And sometimes they happen. Like, just like every one on one coffee, every party isn't perfect. Well, sometimes double dates, you look back and you're like, was that really worth the $130 we collectively spent, or like my wife and I spent on drinks and dinner? I don't know. But oftentimes if you just give people a chance, there's something cool and interesting about them. And you get to try new restaurants, which is often fun. So yeah, so that's the story of T.S. Eliot and Groucho Marx. Hopefully that gives you something to talk about at your next double date. Thank you again for listening, and more importantly, for being our friends. We'll see you soon.